All of these PCs can run over 90,000 games, and they're all under $900. Hi guys, Colesy, and today I'm going to be looking at a bunch of very budget-orientated PCs, but still that are able to run a whole heap of games. I have 5 recommendations for the UK and 5 recommendations for the US. I have checked all these PCs to make sure that they do meet the 90,000 spec that I decided to make this video about. The number in question, the 90,000, comes from this website here called PCGameBenchmark.com. Now I found this, and basically what you can do is enter the specs of your PC or a PC that you're looking at, and it will give you a list of compatible games. So these are games that your PC meets the minimum spec to be able to run. What I have done is I have tested all of these PCs. I went and looked on Amazon for some budget orientated PCs, and I checked to make sure that they are running 90,000 plus video games. That's a lot of video games. That's going to take you a while to get through. So all of the links to all of these PCs will be in the description if you want to check them out. And if you want some extra help or extra advice, if you have a specific budget you're working to, which is a little bit more than this or a little bit less than this, feel free to drop a comment. I do my best to get back to every single one of you and help you the best I can to find you a PC for you. Let's jump into the PCs that I have chosen today to show you guys. PC number 1, we have the VinoScorp gaming PC desktop computer. It's got an i7-3770, 16 gig of RAM, a GTX 1650 4GB, 256 gig SSD, terabyte hard drive. Here's the thing with these first ones. These are very reasonably priced PCs with graphics cards. So for most games, you're going to want graphics card. The thing with the first couple of PCs I have here, and it's going to be the same with the US, is that it is using a much older CPU. So it's using a 3rd gen CPU, Intel CPU. Generally, I wouldn't recommend buying a PC like this, not because there's necessarily anything wrong with it, just because for future proofness, you're better buying newer so that it has an upgrade path. You have something to upgrade to in the future. Now, with something like this, if you wanted to upgrade the CPU in the not too distant future, then you're going to have to upgrade the motherboard, the CPU, probably the RAM, because this is probably not DDR4. No, it's DDR3. So again, you've got a fair amount to upgrade there, whereas if you buy something a little newer, like I will show you later on, there is more of an upgrade path. You're able to simply replace the CPU and upgrade it that way. It's still an option. It is the lowest price option that I could find that has half decent reviews. It's £409.99. It does have a 1650, which is a decent, fairly modernish GPU, which is good, and that's really what carries it to being able to play such a wide variety of games. Next up, we have the VinoScorp gaming PC. Again, it's got the i7-3770, 16 gig of RAM. This one has a 1660 Super, so this is very much like the last one. It's got the same CPU and everything, but it does have a little bit of a upgraded GPU, so again, it's going to give you better performance. But like I said with the last one, ideally you'd want to have a balance of fairly recent GPU and fairly recent CPU as well, so that you have got that upgrade path, that future proofness with your PC. This doesn't have that with the CPU because it is an older CPU, but it has performance there to be able to game. And if you're looking at a £500 budget, then this might be the option for you. Another option around this sort of budget would be to buy a PC that doesn't have a dedicated graphics card. Now, you can get like the newer Ryzen CPUs. They have built-in graphics. Now, they are not as good as a dedicated graphics card like the 1650 or the 1660 Super, but because you're able to buy a more modern CPU, you can add a GPU later down the line, and then you have a more future-proof PC overall. But the thing is, the PC without the graphics card is going to be roughly around this price anyway, and it's not going to be able to play as many games as something like this with a dedicated graphics card. It's just whether you can wait or you can save that extra money to be able to get something that is a little bit newer than these. But these are decent options if you're really looking to get into PC gaming right away, and this is the top end of your budget. PC number 3. Now, this is where we're getting on to PCs that I think are really, really good recommendations because they are up to date, very recent CPUs and everything. So this is a CyberPower Wyvern gaming PC. It has a Ryzen 5 4500, GTX 1650, 16 gig of RAM, 500 gig NVMe SSD. So yeah, this is similar to the first one in terms of its GPU. It has the same GPU, but it has a much more recent CPU with the Ryzen 5 4500. It's got 16 gig of RAM. It's DDR4 RAM, which is nicer because it's much more up to date. And like I said, if you do want to upgrade this a little bit down the line, you can just replace a CPU, and you don't have to replace the whole motherboard and everything. So this is £550.80. I think this is a really good deal, a brand that I've heard a lot about and have a good reputation in the business, so something that I would confidently recommend. And for £550, I think that is a decent deal to have a dedicated graphics card as well. Next up on the list, we have the Vibox V51. It's got a Ryzen 5 4500. It's got the GTX 1660 Super, 16GB of RAM, and a terabyte SSD. Now, I really like this one personally. I think this is kind of like a really nice sweet spot. It's under £600. It's 595 basically. It's got the 1660 Super, which I think is a really good sort of mid-ish level graphics card. It's got the Ryzen 5 4500 processor, which again is a fairly recent CPU from AMD. It's got the 16GB of RAM, which I would say is roughly the minimum you want to aim at. 8GB is really the minimum, but 16GB is that nice sweet spot of how much RAM you want to have, which again, it's DDR4 because it's a recent CPU, and you've got a nice terabyte SSD to store everything on. So I think this is a really good sweet spot. I recommend Vibox a fair amount on my videos because they always seem to have good reviews. I've never had the chance personally to play around with one of these. They seem to have good reviews and be fairly well received, and so I think this is a good option here. On to our final UK PC. So the final one we have is an ADME gaming PC. It is an Intel i5 12400F, RTX 3050, 16GB of RAM, 240GB SSD, and a terabyte hard drive. So this one's $650. This is kind of the top end of the budget that I was aiming at. Just trying to keep it as low as possible. But again, very recent CPU with the 12th gen i5, 6 cores, 12 threads, RTX 3050. So this actually has ray tracing on it. So this is a very good PC. And for the £650, I think this is a pretty solid bet. And again, the ADME or ADMI, don't know how to pronounce it. I've always said ADME. Again, a well-known, renowned company, well reviewed on Amazon as well, so I think this is a good option. There is a fair difference in price between the lower end ones and this higher end one, but when you go back to like the CyberPower 550 compared to like the £500 of the VinoScorp, the second VinoScorp that we looked at with the 1660 Super. Now I know it's got a 1660 Super, but it's probably worth spending the extra £50 if you can, or saving that extra £50 and waiting a little bit longer to get something with a much more up-to-date Ryzen CPU. Now, I've given you all the options because I want to be, I want to give you all the options. I don't judge anyone if they buy the cheaper PC. Getting into PC gaming is it always seems to have a barrier, and I want to make these videos to show that the barrier is not quite as big as you might think, and you can buy the lower end PCs and still have a great time. Honestly, like, you don't need to have the most expensive or technically superior PC to have an enjoyable experience on PC. So I totally do not judge anyone if they buy these VinoScorps. I am recommending them to you as an option. But in my personal opinion, I think it is better to save up the little bit extra and buy something with a more up-to-date CPU and RAM and GPU combo than it is to buy something with such an old CPU. Those are 5 options for the UK. We will now move on to the options I have chosen for the US. We've tried to stick to a similar rough budget conversion rate wise. We're starting off here with the SDG Aubryon Gaming Intel Core i3 10100F Radeon RX 5500 XT, 16GB of DDR4, 512GB SSD. Now this is $480. So this is, in my opinion, this is a much better recommendation than the ones that we had for the UK, because not only pretty cheap price for the PC, but it is much more up to date in terms of its CPU. This is a 10th gen i3 as compared to the UK, which the cheapest one I could find had a 3rd gen i7. So much newer. This is much more of a concise PC that is at least reasonably similar aged in its parts. So I think this is a decent option. The reviews aren't quite as high, but still, it's a lot. They've had a lot of reviews and they're still going, so hopefully that means that this is a good option for you guys. Again, we're looking at 90,000 games. We're looking at such a wide breadth of games. You can't expect a PC like this to necessarily be able to play the most up-to-date AAA games, but it's going to play a majority of games. You've got that whole back catalogue of PC games. You've got a whole ever-evolving indie game market to check out. So yeah, this is my first option, $480. I think that's a solid, reasonable amount. And the nice thing is that even though that buying through Amazon, you have that security that if there is any problem with your PC, if it does arrive and it's not quite working, you are easily able to like get the refund and send it back and stuff because you're buying through Amazon. That's why it's easier to recommend PCs through Amazon, because the return, the customer support is always going to be the same no matter what brand or anything you're using. Next up, we have the NSX gaming PC, AMD Ryzen 5 5500, GTX 1650, NVMe 512 gig SSD, 16 gig of RAM. I've not heard of NSX, to be honest. I hadn't heard of NSX. Now, the US is obviously not where I'm from, so I won't necessarily have heard of them, but the reviews seem good. For the price of $600, a little bit of a jump from the last one, but I think this is reasonable. This is again an up-to-date CPU, an up-to-date GPU, a decent GPU, a decent CPU, and they work well together. 16 gig DDR4 RAM, which again is up-to-date RAM wise. It's got a good upgrade path, so if in future you did want to upgrade like the GPU, you can take it out. You can swap in a RTX 3060 or 3050 or whatever you wanted to put in it, really. And CPU wise, you could upgrade to a Ryzen 7 if you wanted without having to change much in terms of like motherboard or any of that stuff, which is really the main option here. Is that I want to recommend PCs that meet the spec and meet this, able to play such a wide variety of games, but also is future-proof enough that it's going to be a good few years before you even need to think about really upgrading any part of it. I don't want you to go and buy something secondhand that's really old, and honestly in like 6 months or a year you're going to be like, this is completely out of date and I need to replace the whole thing. I want to try and make something that if you are going to upgrade it, you can upgrade it piece by piece over time, because that is the easiest way to do it. I know that you don't want to go out there and have to throw your PC away and buy an entirely new one. You've already spent a bunch of money on this PC. You want to have it for a while. Next up, we have the Zotac Gaming MEK Hero G1. Has an 11th core, 11400F, GTX 1650. This only has 8 gig of RAM and 500 gig M.2. So this one, again, I'm trying to up the price slowly as we go. It falls in a strange area for me because I wouldn't necessarily recommend a PC with 8 gig of RAM all the time. Like I said, I really want to aim for 16. 8 gig is the minimum RAM. 16 gig is the sweet spot of RAM, but this still does fall in that it's able to play all those games. It still does fall in that category. However, for the price that it is, even, and the fact that it's on offer makes it that price as well, maybe not necessarily the ideal one to go for. If you can save a little bit more, maybe the next one is a better option, but this is still an option out there for you guys, and it is spec wise decent. Like, the RAM is up to date, the CPU is up to date, the GPU is up to date. So these are good things. This is not a bad PC, just is it a good PC in terms of value for money for what it is. Next up, we have a Skytech Gaming Nebula, Intel Core i5 13400F, RTX 3050, terabyte NVMe SSD, 16 gig of RAM. Now this is just a lovely PC all around. $750, really nice PC. It's got ray tracing with the RTX 3050. It is an entry-level ray tracing, but it is still ray tracing if you want to do that. It's got a very up-to-date CPU. You've got your 16 gig of RAM. You've got a whole terabyte of NVMe SSD. It's all good. And I know that Skytech, I recommend them a fair amount when I get to these US PCs. On previous videos, I've recommended Skytech because they have good reviews, they have a good reputation, and they seem to be very reasonably priced for what they are. So I think for $750, this is a solid bet. If you think about the fact that it is $70 more than the last one we looked at, I think it's worth saving the extra $70 and buying this for definite than buying the last one. You're getting a 3050 instead of a 1650, so that is a much bigger improvement. You're getting a newer CPU, you're getting twice as much RAM. I think this is a really nice sweet spot for just an entry-level gaming PC. Higher entry-level, because obviously you could buy any of the previous ones and they would be more lower entry-level, but this is still a really good entry-level PC and you would be very, very happy with a PC like this. And the final PC I have to recommend for you guys is the Thermaltake Glacier i350 gaming desktop. It's got an i5 12400F, it's got 16 gig of RAM, it's got an RTX 3050, it's got a terabyte NVMe SSD. So again, similar spec to the last one. It is slightly more expensive in price. It is $899.99, so it's $900. It's a Thermaltake, again, a well-known brand. Would I personally recommend this over the last one? Probably not. I'd probably go with the last one, to be honest. I'd go with the Skytech. Just because it's basically exactly the same spec. If not, the Skytech has a newer CPU because it has a 13th gen rather than a 12th gen. But the option is here for you guys if you like the look, particularly if you like the brand of thermal take, if you know it better, if you trust it more, then that's fair enough, completely fair enough. I know that people have these not brand loyalties, but they have this brand image of some brands and they are more trustworthy of that. They might have had a good experience with them in the past, and I totally respect that. Maybe you just like the aesthetic of this one more. Perfectly fine. Like a thing about PCs is always going to be aesthetic. It's not something I really judge too much in these kind of videos because I'm going for, you know, can this PC run this game? And that is all about spec and internals and hardware. I'm not trying to look for the prettiest PC. It turns out a lot of them are pretty. They make them look very nice. So these are all your 5 options for the US. Like I said, if you do have any questions, if you have a budget you're working to specifically, if you just like a little bit more help, then please feel free to drop a comment. I'm always happy to help and recommend you PCs and work with you guys to try and find a PC that fits your budget, fits your needs, and fits what you want, really. That is all of my recommendations for PCs. That is 10 PCs that will run over 90,000 games on your PC. That's a lot of games, and not one of them went over the budget of $900. That's pretty good. So let's think about that. If you bought the most expensive PC for $900, it can run over 90,000 games. I don't even want to do the math on how much per game that is. $900 divided by 90,000 games equals $0.01, which is 1 penny, 1 cent per game in performance. I don't know if that helps your buying, but it is the statistic there. Obviously that's not how much games cost, so you would actually have to buy some of the games, but that's still a lot of games. Hope you guys found this useful. If you have any questions, like I said, leave them in the comments. If you have any PC recommendation that you'd like to see me make, if you're like, oh, can you make a PC budget can you make a PC recommendation video for this budget, or can you make a PC recommendation for this game, or, you know, emulation, any of that stuff, then please do let me know in the comments, and it will be something that I take into consideration, because I like making these PC recommendation videos. I like to try and help people join PC gaming. And that's not to say that PC gaming is better than console gaming. You play on whatever you play and you enjoy yourself. I love my consoles just as much as I love my PC, but PC to me, because of the wide breadth of games, the back catalogue, the indie games, all that stuff, it's my favourite place to game. So, hope you guys found this useful. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe if you did find this useful and you had enjoyed the video, and I will catch you next time. Bye!